we think that there's every reason to be optimistic, despite that this year and potentially next is going to be challenging, but that fundraisers and the sector at large are going to rise to the challenges and succeed.
So Victor Perton here at the Centre for Optimism, and it's the Optimism Cafe. And today I'm absolutely delighted to have Katherine Raskob, the CEO of the Fundraising Institute Australia. She's got vast experience in so many sectors, and she works across so many sectors. So it's a great honour and a privilege to have you join us, Katherine. Welcome.
Thank you, Victor. I'm really glad to be here.
Well, what we always do at the Centre for Optimism, the first question we ask any of our guests is, what makes you optimistic? Katherine, what makes you optimistic?
Well, as we all know, it's been a really challenging year this year on so many fronts. You know, we started with the extreme bushfire emergency at the start of the year, then the pandemic. Like, there are a lot of reasons not to be optimistic. But I guess what I've seen from my role as Chief Executive of Fundraising Institute Australia is the incredible resilience of fundraisers, as well as the Australian donor, who just continues to keep giving and giving, digging into their pockets and responding to needs that exist in their own backyards, in their communities, and in their country. And I find that really incredible, that even with each of us having our own individual challenges dealing with these issues and the pandemic, that we are still such an incredibly generous country, and we keep giving to those in need.
My heart is warmed. That's just a beautiful, beautiful answer. Now, a couple of months ago, I read an article in which you said, we are an incredibly strong sector comprised of resilient optimists. One of the keys to fundraisers' success in the future will be the ability to adapt and innovate, particularly around digital innovation. Would you tell us more about your resilient optimists, those members that inspire you and obviously inspire the community to donate to good causes?
Yeah, so what's incredible is that a lot of the fundraisers' efforts, a lot of their efforts and their results come from a couple of key channels that were severely impacted by the pandemic. So, for example, a lot of organizations raise funds through events, and those are physical events, and those are, they're either, dinners or challenges or fun runs or whatever that they are, and they often require people to get together physically. The second area is in face-to-face fundraising. So, as you know, those who are in shopping malls and on street corners, who are reaching out to everyday Australians asking for their support. Now, those two channels of fundraising have obviously been severely impacted with physical and social distancing. And so I think fundraisers could have thought maybe at March or April, we're just going to give up and go home. But instead, what they did is they used all of their creativity and their brains and their amazing connection with donors to find new and innovative ways to raise funds, even in light of that physical and social distancing. So, for example, some of the members who have, the Cancer Council morning tea or the MS run to Kiss MS Goodbye, instead of sort of just going, oh, we're just going to give up and go home, they converted their events to digital events or to virtual opportunities or to capturing the attention through other channels. Or they converted their fundraising teams from a face-to-face interaction to a telephone interaction, checking in with donors and their beneficiaries on how they're doing during the pandemic. So they were continuing to build relationships with these people. And those are the kinds of things that really inspired me. What's incredible, first of all, is that they came up with all these amazing ideas to translate their activity to a new norm. And second of all, that Australians responded equally, or in some cases even more generously than before. So I find that really incredible that, I know so many sectors have been impacted by, almost every sector, by the pandemic, but what we're doing is we're actually raising funds to change the world, to make the difference that we need to make where, governments and others aren't able to do that. And to be able to continually find ways to do that, to connect with donors and to tell those amazing stories of the impact they're making is really incredible.
But again, what Disney produced some research recently. It said people are yearning for stories of hope and optimism. And Katherine, you exemplify that. They're sick of the gloom and doom. They love to hear those fantastic stories of success. Now, one of the things you've done this year is produce a really interesting futuristic document called Fundraising Futures Report 2020 and predicting new innovation. And it's a fundamentally optimistic document. Do you want to tell us more about that, Katherine?
Yeah, so at the start of the pandemic, we surveyed with our research partner, More Strategic, all of our members and asked them how they were feeling. You know, we were faced with the pandemic and likely months and months ahead. I mean, we didn't know back in March how bad it was actually going to be, but, you know, of not being able to do the key fundraising work in the way that we had always done that. And we asked them how they felt. And a lot of them were really, really worried about how they were able to deliver fundraising revenue and in turn then make the impact that they need to make on Australian society. And what was incredible is that months later, when we did the same survey, they were like, wow, it wasn't actually as bad as we expected. They were sort of predicting, you know, potentially a 20% decline in fundraising revenue this year. Other reports have suggested that as well, including JB Weir and a couple of other, you know, key reports. And what we discovered is that because Australians were continuing in their generosity, continuing to reach into their pockets to give to those in need, that actually it wasn't as bad as they had thought at the start. So the Fundraising Futures Report really talks about how the start looked a little bit negative, but in fact, it turned out to be a lot more positive because of Australians' generosity. But also we're aware that it's not just a 3 or 6 month blip, right? It's going to be a long-term recovery from the pandemic. And also, although Australians are generous, they are going to increasingly feel the impact of the economic recession and the situations we're facing here. So, so we did show that fundraisers are going to need to continue to innovate and be creative and use new channels, find new ways to tell the stories of impact so that they continue to inspire Australians to keep on giving. And I think what's incredible is the survey showed that most fundraisers just adapted. They were like, right, you know, this is a situation we're in, we're just going to think of new ways and we're going to go for it. And rather than that sort of doom and gloom feel, they largely felt that there were opportunities ahead for them to be able to go forward. And, you know, younger donors in particular are more used to digital channels, used to raising money through Facebook and all the other social media channels. And so potentially this is, you know, working in line with the way society is going anyway, and with the way younger donors want to be engaged, want to hear the stories of impact. So we think that there's every reason to be optimistic, despite that this year and potentially next is going to be challenging, but that fundraisers and the sector at large are going to rise to the challenges and succeed.
Wonderful, just wonderful news. And look, lastly, Katherine, one of the projects we at the Centre for Optimism have been doing through the pandemic is understanding how people become stronger through these crises. You know, in some senses, you know, Nietzsche's old comment, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. And our findings are 65% of people we've asked can articulate something better in their lives as a result of the shutdown. And interesting enough, News Limited mimicked our study with their readers and actually got 80% of people, but they didn't ask them to actually articulate what was the better normal. So for you, you know, as a leader in the fundraising sector, personally, what are the habits you've learned about yourself and those around you that are going to make you a better person coming out of the pandemic?
I think from my perspective, leading the organization, Fundraising Institute Australia, I also lead the entire sector because we're the peak body. And I think what I've discovered is the value and importance of the relationships. And that includes relationships with our members. I remember at the start of the pandemic, a lot of our members who hadn't been in touch with us for a while rang and said, we need help about this. And can you tell us about that? And share with us the research. What are you looking at? How can we convince our boards that, you know, there will be some challenging times ahead? And so we responded quite quickly with a lot of resources and tools and other information. But what was really incredible is the ability to build the relationship throughout all that. That actually it's the relationships that are stronger, even in spite of the physical distancing and the challenges that we're all facing. And that we're all so happy to be part of a solution, right? Not just sitting on the sidelines going, oh, it's all going to be a disaster. How are we going to do that? So from the fundraising perspective, that's a key learning for me, is how increasingly important those one-to-one relationships are. And I guess secondly, from a leader of teams, I think most of us have discovered the requirement for flexibility. You know, like, even though I'm a relatively young CEO, I'm not sure, I'm thinking I'm a relatively young CEO, And I didn't grow up in very conservative or traditional structures of hierarchy in companies. At the same time, I probably did have an expectation that everybody comes to the office, everybody works their 8 or 10-hour days, and then they go home, and we can see all that happening in front of our eyes, and it gives us confidence, right? But I think in this new environment, what we have to learn to be is be very flexible, allow the teams to respond to the pandemic and the way they need to work in the way that works for them, obviously keeping in mind the needs of the company and the organization, but also just allowing for that flexibility for being able to deal with that, having a bit of control over your life, a little bit of work-life balance, and allowing that rather than having your own views, I guess, be put upon your team in a very strict or conservative way. So that's been a really challenging learning and for me to get through in my role in this year. And I think I've definitely come out the other side going, yep, this flexibility to keep employees and team members happy and engaged in what we're doing is even more critical than my, small little need to go, are you all here? Are you all working? So that's been a great learning for me. And I think for many leaders, and I think we'll carry that into the future, and that can only benefit Australia and the way that we work into the future.
Yeah, it's very much about trust, isn't it? I saw a beautiful definition the other day of trust, that trust is an optimistic belief that the person making the promise will keep their promise. And I think most employers and bosses in Australia have found that, yeah, people working from home in some cases work better. I've seen a call center that I'm involved with in a corporate, and it already had the highest rankings for a call center in that sector. But working from home, not having to get, showered, dressed, lipsticked, everything, the team actually performed higher from home than in a noisy environment. So we've got to work out how to take advantage of that better normal.
Yeah,
Where, with your rabbit or your dog or cat sitting on your lap,
yeah.
maybe it's a better way to work.
And look, we've all seen that, via the various Zoom meetings and things we've had. And there's also a joy in that, in having that opportunity. And I think I love your definition of trust, that sort of optimism that people are going to keep their promises. And I totally agree that that's true. And what's incredible is that we're often rewarded with that result. And I find that really fantastic.
Well, I've been deeply rewarded, Katherine, in having this conversation with you. You are an inspiring individual, a positive individual, and obviously doing great things for the fundraising sector. So thank you for joining us in the Optimism Cafe today. And we hope you're going to be a regular guest over the years to come to share this extraordinary optimism that you have and the sector has.
I'd be delighted to. I'd be delighted to do that. And thank you again for having me. It was a pleasure.
Thank you. Well, we hope you enjoyed that episode of the Centre for Optimism's Optimism Cafe with Katherine. We'd love you to be involved with the Centre for Optimism. Feel free to take up a free subscription, or alternatively, if you've got a guest to suggest, we'd love to hear from you. Have a great day.